Hello there, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Weekly Art Tips. I'm Ando, and today is going to be another technique video. So the topic is going to be on line variation, and right now I'm using Clip Studio Paint Pro, but you can really use these kinds of line tips on most other digital painting softwares. I'm sure you can try to get these kinds of similar line qualities in something like Microsoft Paint, but it'll probably take you a while, and it's not going to look quite as natural as if you were going to use it in like Photoshop or Clip Studio with a tablet. So if you have a mouse, these are going to also be a little bit more difficult to get the same kind of line quality. But I'm sure it is possible, and prove me wrong by posting some of your mouse Microsoft Paint images in the DeviantArt group, and I will eat my words. So let's get right down to the tips for today. So normally when using like digital software, when you're first starting out, it's like this mentality that everything must be super clean. Some people don't have that. I know that I definitely, when I was first starting out, had this mentality that if my lines were not clean, that they were somehow not good. And I'm going to kind of be putting some of these ideas to the test today. So I know that when I was first starting out, I used not Microsoft. I used GIMP a lot. I did use Microsoft Paint at the very beginning, but when I was doing my first digital pieces that had layers that I put a lot of time into, I used GIMP. And they have like a pen tool where you could kind of lay out the track of where you wanted the line, and then you would kind of hit like an outline button, and it would follow the track that you made and make a super clean line. And it was kind of like this type of line where it was all the same width. And that worked okay for something. That kind of line looks fine if you're doing something like, I don't know, like a crystal or something. Like you want something really geometric, then yeah, by all means, use that kind of line. But when you're doing something that requires like a bit more of an organic movement to it, like maybe you're doing cloth, or maybe like an animal, fur, hair, people, foliage, this kind of line quality is just not gonna cut it. I don't know what kind of crystal I'm making here, but yeah, so it's all geometric. And this is nice for something that's going to be like more of a technical illustration, like maybe you want to do a building or something, then it is absolutely fine to have lines the same width. You would probably end up, to make this kind of better, you'd end up doing like the shift button, get really clean, sharp lines. But if you're going to do something more natural, these kind of tapered lines are really what you want to look out for a bit more. So yeah, like it gets kind of thin at either end and thicker in the middle. And that's dependent on how much pressure you put on your pen. So most tablets have pen pressure. Some of the older ones might not, but most of the newer Wacom tablets, like my Cintiq has this a lot. My old Intuos Pen and Touch had the pressure sensitivity. You can get pressure sensitivity on even if you have like an iPad Pro or like a Surface Book Pro, or not even the book, just like the Surface Pro. They have pressure sensitivity in the pen as well. And so that's gonna really give you these nice tapered lines. And this looks really good for, especially like if I'm doing this as like hair or something, this is a nice way of getting that kind of movement across. It works with water, like I said, pretty much any kind of organic shape that you're going after. Cloth, vegetables, yeah. So those are the kind of the difference between these types of lines, and that's what I wanted to talk about, was the variation. So you want to have a bit more variation in the thickness of your lines, and it will really add a lot more like character and movement to your images than these kinds of like samey lines. So to kind of illustrate this, let's go over here and let's draw an apple. So with my same thickness line here, this is not a very good apple. Trying to talk and draw at the same time is very difficult. So you have like an apple here, and let's say it's sitting on a table. So there, that's an apple, let's just say, for argument's sake. And then with this one, let's try and make it as similar as possible. This is not working out. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so I've got my other apple, and let's put this one also on like a table. So you notice that with this one, there's a lot more of a variation. It looks like a thicker line at the bottom and a bit thinner at the top, and that can really do a lot to just kind of get the idea of light across. So you can argue that the light source is coming from up here, because you got this nice shadow down here, and then it gets to the bottom and it looks like the apple is more weighted on the table, versus this one that looks very two-dimensional. But like I said before, if you don't have like a tablet pen or anything that has like pressure sensitivity, you can get similar things to this by just kind of building up your line. But granted, it's going to be a little bit messier than this one, and it's going to take a while to kind of get a similar effect. But as it was just like with the same line thickness, it looks much more two-dimensional. It doesn't look like it has much weight to it. Everything looks like the same weight. Everything looks like it's getting the same amount of light. It looks more like a cardboard cutout than anything. So just kind of that little bit of variation in your line can add a lot to your images. So another example of this could be just distance. So let's say you have your regular marker over here, and you have a person who's standing in the distance, and then you have another person up here who's waving to them. So let's say that you want it to make it look like that kind of angle. But the way that the lines are right here, this guy has the same line thickness as this guy, and it doesn't look like they are that distant. In fact, it looks more like this little guy is kind of floating in the air, and this guy is using, I don't know, telekinesis to just lift him off the ground. So that's not necessarily the type of perspective we want to use. But if we use our little pen tool back here, we can make the guy in the background have a thinner line, and then the guy in the front can have a thicker line, and that brings him more forward in the picture. So it looks like there is a receding perspective. And you can even take this a lot farther. Like say we had another person back here, can use like barely any line at all, and it'll look like it keeps going. So that's just a thing to keep in mind when working with line thickness. So even if you are using like a marker tool like this, you can still get a similar effect by just making your line thinner. So even if you did want to just have like all of your lines the same thickness, and see, that looks more like this person is in the distance than this one. So that's just something to keep in mind when working with your line thickness. Because when I was first starting off with like traditional medium stuff, I kind of got the idea of, oh, you know what, I'm going to get like 1,000,000 micron markers. So I had about, I don't know, 20 to 30 micron pens that were all black, and they were all different sizes. And I had specific pens for specific jobs. Like, oh, well, I'll make all of the face details with my .05 pen, and then I'll make the hair details with like the 10 pen, and the 3 pen will be for body lines and all of that kind of thing. And that was kind of close to a similar idea, but you don't really want to assign your lines to specific things. You're going to change them up. Like I said, if I was just doing the same body line, like everything was like a .3, I would end up doing like this body at a .3 and this body at a .3, but the hair would be like a 1 or something. So that really wouldn't help the situation at all. So, but if I decided that the person in the background was going to be in like .3, and then the person up here would be in like 10 or something, then that would be easier. So if you don't understand the why was I saying 10? It was just 1.0. So I don't think it ever got to 10. But if you don't really understand the sizing of micron pens, I'll put a link to just like some micron pens. That way you can check that out. It'll probably be an Amazon link, so you can check that out. And I'll also put links to the other videos that I made, because I did mention in the critique video I did of my own work that I had the issue with like the lines being all the same, and I mentioned that the characters that I had in the forefront had the same line thickness as the characters in the back, so it was kind of similar to this situation. But moving on, let's go talk about the mood that you can get with lines. So let's bring back our marker tool over here. So when you are doing something with thicker lines, it can really add a bit more ambiance to an image. So say we had a person just sitting here, and this is terrible. Okay, so we had like a person sitting here. This is just like a terrible doodle of a person. But say we wanted to push the values of our lines over here. Or push the values of our lines. I don't think that was an actual sentence. So say we wanted to add more shadow to the image. That's a sentence. Okay, so we wanted to make it more like this. You can really add a lot to the shading. This weird egg potato man looks like he's in a film noir at this point. So just adding a thicker line to one side of your inked images can add a lot of mood to it. This guy looks a bit bored. This guy looks like he's about ready to discover a terrible murder or something. He's going to reveal that he was the murderer all along. Gasp! Okay, so yeah, so just kind of changing up your lines a bit, and I worked on that pretty small. Here, let me pull that up a bit larger, just in case. Yeah, there we go. That way you can see a bit better. I tend to work in one corner whenever I'm using my tablet. There's just so much space. Alright, so moving on, the quality of your line can also really change up the mood of a piece as well. So, like instead of using this, say we were going to draw like a mountain range or something, and the sun coming up behind it. So here, it's kind of your mountain range, and here's the sun. That's terrible. There we go. The other sun looked more like an egg yolk. Okay, so say this is our mountain range over here. This looks like almost like an ink painting. So if you were going for like a more like Chinese scroll type background, this thick line might be something you would be interested in using. But if you wanted to go with something a bit more like painterly or sketchy, you could use a line quality like this one. A lot of digital painting programs have natural brush types, like where they look like pencil marks or something. You can also learn to make them yourself. I haven't quite gotten to that point where I understand how to really get good brushes made, but I'll probably make a video later on just talking about making your own brushes. I personally use on Clip Studio, I just use the ones that are included, because I normally just use this G brush or G pen over here. I like the quality that one gives me for my solid outlines. And if I want something more natural, I end up just using Photoshop, because I have the Mega Pack, which I'll put a link to it. The Mega Pack is a really great collection of just kind of traditional medium brushes. So it has like oil paints, it has like watercolor, different types of ink pens, that kind of thing. So yeah, like with this one over here, and you can just add some more sketchy lines to it. I was working a little neater than I would if it was an actual pencil. But this kind of line quality would look a lot better in like almost like a sketchbook style. So the difference in your pen quality can really determine the mood of a piece. This one looks a lot more serene. This one has a lot more energy to it. Like maybe it's like a watercolor, like the baselines for a watercolor. Maybe it's just like a sketch style. You can probably just color underneath it as well. But I think that maybe like more washed out color would look better with this one, and then like a more like vibrant color could work better with this one, or a softer color. Actually, I guess it really depends. You'd have to just test out and see what looks best. But in this situation, I would probably use a lighter color on this sketchier version and darker color with this lined version over here. But yeah, just kind of changing up your line quality can really add a lot to an image. Especially like the messier the line is, the more you're probably going to want to use like a more watercolor type of coloring process. So like I could theoretically just go in here with like these pastel-y colors and just keep building it up and end up having like a really nice like painterly background. So just something that you can think of is when working with line. Sometimes your outlines don't really even need to be visible. You can just work just with color and just use your backgrounds as a bit of like a sketch, like a background sketch. I have it with this piece over here that I'm working on. Is I have like my background lines, and I'm going to end up just laying in my colors and making it a lot more painterly than like really thick lines. Or I might even go the opposite direction. I'm still at the beginning stages in this, but it's going to be like a city landscape, and like I could go like more of a graphic novel style where I have big thick outlines, or I could just completely nix the outlines altogether. So that's definitely a thing that you can think about when like deciding what kind of line work you want to have present in your image, if any at all. Some people just, like, they prefer to have their lines very thin and unnoticeable. Some people like theirs a lot thicker. It definitely adds to the aesthetic of the image, depending on which direction you go. What you don't want is to have your lines detract from your image. So you don't want anything really distracting. If you're doing something like an adorable picture book, you don't want these really heavy outlines. Like these kinds of dark shadow outlines would look really good in like a visual novel, or like a gritty animation, or just like an illustration that deals with like a darker subject. You don't want these kinds of really drastic shadows in a picture book for children, unless you want to give children nightmares, which, I mean, it's a different way of making picture books. I'm sure there's some parents that would actually buy that. Anyways, getting back to line quality, let's talk about the sketch quality. So I've been working pretty neat because I'm just doing like really quick things. So these lines, there aren't very many sketches to them. I think this was probably the sketchiest that I went. But there's a lot to be said about having your images more sketchy. So like even with this kind of G pen thing, you can get like these nice sketch qualities, and this would look pretty nice. This is like maybe it's hair or something. These kind of sketchier qualities in the way that like down here, like the bristles kind of overlap. That's a pretty interesting effect, especially if it's going to be like a close-up on, like, say this is somebody's, I don't know, bangs or something. That's kind of like a nice effect to it. And when working in like a sketchier design, you can kind of keep building. And over here is a bit more, oh, actually this looks more like grass. Both of them do. So yeah, so say you're working with the grass and stuff, and you can just keep on building your lines. So, like I said, it's more stylistic, just whatever your like image calls for. Alright, so just to kind of finish off and kind of conclude this whole technique video, let's talk about the way that you make your lines. So with these tapered like brushes, they can kind of get like really thin at the top and bottom. You can get a lot more natural movement. They can bring things closer and make things recede more, versus this kind of solid line, versus like these lines, which when you're moving fast, you'll notice that you kind of get like this weird like lump at the end, or at the beginning. And it kind of, it's almost like if you crochet, it almost looks like a crochet hook. I don't think that that's a very flattering way of making your lines. So if you're going to use these kinds of pen shapes, I definitely recommend using like the type of pen tool layout, or just using like the shift button. So just remember that when you're working on a piece and you want to make it stand out a lot more, that little bit of line variation can really add a lot to a piece. Anyways, I think that this is going to be it for this video. These technique videos are going to probably end up being around like 20-something minutes each. The first one went on a bit longer than normal because I was going over like a vast amount of stuff in comparison to just like one or two ideas like this one had. It was just mostly about line quality, but ones in the future might end up being a bit longer, but they're all gonna basically be around like 20-something minutes. The critique videos might end up being a bit longer, and on that note, if you have any works that you want me to look over, feel free to send one or two of them my way. I think I said on the earlier videos to send them to my personal account on DeviantArt, but I would really prefer if you just sent it as a note to the group. That way I have them all in one place. So send all of that information over to the Weekly Art Tips group and I'll look it over. And you might see your work in a future critique video, so that's going to be really exciting. If you kind of want an idea of how I do critiques, you can look over the first critique video where I go over my own old gallery and feel like dying inside. So that's nice. I don't know if you could tell that I felt like dying inside. So, I'm kidding, I didn't feel like dying inside. I mean, my old stuff is old, but it's not terrible by any means. So I will definitely get to another critique video soon, but the next video is going to be another illustrated video, and I'm going to get that out the first week of September, so look forward to that. And in the meantime, keep on arting and try out a whole bunch of different types of brushes and line quality. So let me know what you thought of this video, and also let me know on the gallery page. Just like send a note to the group and like label it topic ideas if you have a topic that you want me to talk about in the future. So talk to you guys later. Bye bye.